Islam is not a religion that has advocated or experimented with the separation of church and state. There was no context in the past that necessitated the separation of the two. There was no Rome that had control over Jerusalem and that forced Jesus to say, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's." Islam begins within a homogeneous ethnic community in Arabia, not governed by any imperial power, even though two major powers existed to the north of it, and was thus able to establish a social framework that required legal jurisdiction. And thus the Sharia became law. If circumstances had been different, if there was indeed a Rome that had colonized Arabia, then who knows? There might well have been, at its very genesis, talk, if not actual implementation of a separation of the sacred and the profane. But from its very inception, there was no need to separate the sacred and the profane. From that Arabian melting pot emerged a civilization and a colonizing power that took control of much of the known world at the time. And within 100 years, the religion that was Islam became a civilizational, cultural phenomenon all the way from what is now Bangladesh to Spain. That particular religion, which had become a civilization and a colonizing power, required a legal framework to conduct the affairs of its people, Muslim and non-Muslim. And so through the process of fiqh, a legal structure was established. And all those who lived within that community, Muslim and non-Muslim, were governed by that legal structure, Islamic law, or as we now loosely use the term, the Sharia. So the Sharia has always been a living part of the Muslim community, both at the individual as well as at the political level, for Muslims as well as for non-Muslims. Jews who lived within Islamdom were governed in their public life by the Sharia that was Islamic. But that same Sharia insisted that in their private lives, in their family law, for instance, in the laws pertaining to marriages and divorces, then they will necessarily follow Judaic law or Mosaic law. And thus began this system that is still prevalent in some parts of the world, where religion, one particular religion, becomes the foil of society at large, and particular religions are then given space to exercise some aspects of their law within that greater milieu. So it is important to understand that particular history in order to make sense, one, of the relevance of Islamic law to Muslims today, and two, its pervasiveness. Muslims still consider it relevant beyond the personal domain, and one finds it present in the strangest of places. And that brings me to the Sharia today. The Sharia in the world, and again, Sharia, by Sharia I mean Islamic law in any of its manifestations, is far more prevalent than the ruckus that was kicked up as a consequence to the Archbishop's comments seemed to indicate. That particular incident seemed to indicate that this is firstly an Eastern alien oddity, and one that was archaic, if not moribund, and one that had so many imperfections in it that it need not be resurrected. I say to you today that it may well be an oddity to those who've never heard of it or seen it in practice. It may well be archaic to those who have little understanding of its complexities. But it is a phenomenon that is found in many, many parts of the world. When the British colonized South Asia, which is today India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, they perpetuated the Sharia and tinged it with a Western flavor. Remember what we said earlier on, that Islam created a system for societies that were pluralistic and allowed different communities within those societies to exercise their particular laws in keeping with their religious requirements. The British did the same. So you had in South Asia the imperial legal system being the British system. Foreign affairs was conducted according to the British system. The Muslims had colonized India, and so until the British came in, their legal system determined international law, for India, that is. But with the advent of the British, the Sharia was replaced by British law, by English law. And within that English legal system, Hindu law was exercised, Muslim law was exercised, and to the extent that they existed in that particular part of the world, and there are still some, Judaic law or Mosaic law was exercised. And when India gained independence and was partitioned into Muslim India and Hindu India perpetuated the same system. So today, you have a secular foil that is in India's legal system. But within that legal system, there is a domain that is exclusive to Hindus. And their marriages, divorces, and laws of succession are determined by Hindu law. Muslim laws of succession, marriage, and divorces are determined by Islamic law. These are the two dominant religious systems that are operational within a secular legal system in India. And this might sound strange to people who live in Switzerland, where you have ethnic, cultural, and historical homogeneity. So the idea of any legal system, foreign, coming in is hugely problematic. But if the world is becoming truly global, and this is becoming a melting pot, then Switzerland is not the future. Switzerland is not the future. Lebanon is the future, perhaps. In Lebanon, you have a legal system that is constitutionally secular and operationally religious. There are 11 different legal systems, religious legal systems, that are operative within the country that is Lebanon. So you have, within Islam, you have Sunni, Shiite, and Druze. Within Christianity, you have Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant. Then you have Judaic, and so on. You have, within that one country, you could be married and divorced according to 11 different systems. Which is not to say that they live in perfect harmony with each other and that their human rights are better preserved and celebrated in that way. It is simply to say that human beings elsewhere have been dealing with the problem of cultural and ethnic pluralities in different ways, and long before the problem found itself on the shores of the United States or the United Kingdom. Religious pluralism was a reality that Islam addressed at its very beginnings. The interesting thing about the Sharia and its connection to the sacred text, because this is a religion of the book, and it defines people of other faiths as those who belong to the family of the religion of the books, or those who do not. So Christians are part of a single family. Jews are part of a single family. Muslims are part of that same family. And what family is that? The family of the Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book. And so for them, therefore, and more so for Muslims, the book becomes more than the bedrock. It becomes the point of departure for any kind of activity, social or otherwise. And so when one traces the origins of the word Sharia in the book itself, one finds that it speaks and uses the terms not to define Islamic law, interestingly, but to accommodate religious pluralism. In one part of the Quran, it says, لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكُمْ لَهَدَى النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. It says, unto each community we have set aside, established a peculiar, particular way of life. لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. A legal system. If the word shari'ah, you can hear the similarity. And if God had so wanted, and if your Lord had so wanted, then all humanity would be following but one way. This is clear, unmistakable evidence from the text itself that Islam is a religion that doctrinally endorses, encourages, and accommodates religious pluralism. وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَهَدَى النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. And if one looks at the other verses of the Quran in which the word Sharia is used, either directly or indirectly, then one finds similarly that it speaks not of a legal system peculiar to Muslims, but it speaks about different paths that different people use and the need to respect those different paths. This is why I said at the outset that using the word Sharia as a synonym for Islamic law obfuscates more than it clarifies. It clouds more than it elucidates. But because the term is now perhaps slightly less prevalent than the word jihad from within the Islamic lexicon, we have no choice but to use it also loosely to define Islamic law.